The massive warship Eternal Dominion floated in the void above the smoldering remains of New Terra Colony. Emperor Zephix stood on the bridge, his 6 arms folded behind his back as he watched the planet burn. His crimson eyes reflected the orange glow of fires that consumed what had once been humanity's newest settlement. "Report," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority that had crushed 1,000 worlds. General Vorthak, a reptilian creature with scales that gleamed like obsidian, approached with measured steps. His clawed feet clicked against the metal floor of the bridge. "My lord, the human settlement has been completely eliminated. No survivors detected." Emperor Zephix nodded slowly. The humans had been troublesome from the moment they ventured beyond their primitive solar system. They refused to bow, refused to accept their place as subjects of the Galactic Empire. Their stubborn resistance had cost them time, resources, and patience. "How many?" the Emperor asked, though he already knew the answer would please him. 5,731 human children, my lord, along with their adult guardians. The colony's records were quite detailed. General Vorthak's reptilian features showed no emotion as he delivered the numbers like a grocery list. The Emperor's mandibles clicked together in what passed for satisfaction among his species. Children were the future of any race. Eliminate the young, and you eliminate hope itself. It was a lesson he had learned during his rise to power, crushing rebellion after rebellion across the galaxy. Excellent. And their home world, Earth remains defiant, my lord. Our intelligence suggests they are still sending colony ships to establish new settlements. This was merely their most recent attempt. Emperor Zephix turned away from the burning planet below. His empire stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, encompassing over 10,000 worlds and countless species. All had eventually bent the knee. All except these stubborn humans who clung to concepts like freedom and independence. "Double the patrols in this sector," he ordered. "I want every human ship detected and destroyed before they can establish another foothold." These creatures seemed to learn only through pain. The bridge crew, a mixture of different alien species all serving the Empire, moved with practiced efficiency. They had witnessed this scene many times before with other rebellious species. The Emperor's methods were brutal but effective. Few races survived his attention for long. As the Eternal Dominion prepared to depart, Emperor Zephix remained at the observation deck. The planet below would be barren for centuries, its atmosphere poisoned by the weapons they had used. Nothing would grow there again. It would serve as a monument to what happened when species defied the Galactic Empire. "My lord," a communications officer called out. "We are receiving a transmission from Earth." "Put it through," the Emperor commanded, curious to hear what pathetic plea or threat the humans might offer. The main screen flickered to life, showing a middle-aged human male in what appeared to be a military uniform. His face was weathered, his eyes hard with barely contained rage. Behind him, other humans moved with purpose, though their expressions carried the weight of fresh grief. "This is Admiral Marcus Chun of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said, his voice steady despite the obvious pain in his eyes. "We know what you did to New Terra Colony. We know about the children." Emperor Zephix's mandibles clicked again, this time in amusement. "And what do you intend to do about it, little human? Send more colony ships for me to destroy? Deploy your primitive weapons against my fleet?" Admiral Chin's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something the Emperor had seen before in the final moments of other species he had conquered. Usually, it was despair or acceptance of defeat. This was different. "We sent a message to every human colony, every ship, every outpost across this galaxy," Admiral Chun continued. "We told them what you did here. We told them about the children who died because of your cruelty. Fear is a useful tool," the Emperor replied dismissively. "Perhaps now your species will finally understand the futility of resistance." Admiral Chun shook his head slowly. "You don't understand us at all, do you? You think killing our children will break us. You think it will make us surrender." The Emperor's amusement began to fade. There was something in the human's tone that he couldn't quite identify. Not fear, not despair, something else entirely. You have just made the greatest mistake in your empire's history, Admiral Chen said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You killed our children, and now you're going to learn what that means. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in silence. Emperor Zephix stared at the blank screen for several moments, a strange unease settling in his chest. In all his centuries of conquest, he had never heard a defeated enemy speak with such quiet certainty. My lord, General Vorthak ventured. Should we be concerned about their threats? The Emperor turned away from the screen. Humans are emotional creatures. They lash out when wounded. Their anger will fade, and then they will accept reality like all the others. But as the Eternal Dominion jumped to hyperspace, leaving the dead world behind, Emperor Zephix found himself thinking about the human admiral's words, about the strange confidence in his voice, about the way he had spoken as if he knew something the Emperor did not. It would be 3 months before the Emperor began to understand what Admiral Chen had meant. 3 months before the first report started coming in from the Outer Rim. 3 months before he realized that killing human children hadn't broken their spirit. It had awakened something far worse. The first incident occurred at Nexus Station, a massive trading hub that served as a crossroads for merchant traffic from a dozen systems. The station housed nearly 2 million beings from hundreds of different species, all conducting business under the protection of the Empire's mighty fleet. Commander Thex was reviewing routine security reports when the alarms began to sound. His 4 eyes scanned the displays rapidly as his subordinates scrambled to identify the threat. Sir, we have multiple unknown ships approaching from Vector 77 Mark IV, his tactical officer reported. How many ships? Commander Thex demanded. 43 contacts, sir. Configuration unknown, but they're broadcasting human identification codes. Commander Thex's confidence wavered slightly. 43 ships was a significant force, but nowhere near enough to threaten a station protected by his battle group. Signal them to maintain distance and prepare for inspection. Standard Imperial protocol. The response came immediately, and it chilled Commander Thex to his core. It was a single word, transmitted on all frequencies, spoken by what sounded like thousands of human voices in perfect unison. Remember. The human ships accelerated toward the station with reckless abandon, making no attempt to evade the defensive fire that began to rain down upon them. But these weren't normal human vessels. They had been modified, reinforced, turned into something else entirely. They were weapons, and they all carried the same message painted across their hulls in letters large enough to be seen from space. For the children of New Terra. Commander Thex watched in horror as the first human ship smashed through his defensive perimeter, its hull erupting in a massive explosion that crippled 2 of his destroyers. The second ship followed, then the third, each one detonating with the force of a small star. Their kamikaze attacks, his tactical officer screamed over the noise of explosions that shook the station. All ships, concentrate fire. Don't let any more through. But it was too late. The human ships kept coming, each one piloted by crews who seemed to have no interest in survival. They rammed Imperial vessels, self-destructed at key points along the station structure, and screamed that single word over and over again, remember. When the attack finally ended, Nexus Station was a twisted ruin drifting in space. Commander Thex was among the few survivors, rescued by a passing patrol after floating in an escape pod for 6 hours. His report would be the first of many that would reach Emperor Zephix's desk over the following weeks. Similar attacks occurred across the Empire's territory. Human ships appearing without warning, crews who fought like they had nothing left to lose, and always that same word transmitted before each assault. Remember. The Emperor studied the reports with growing unease. Humans had never employed such tactics before. Their previous resistance had been conventional, predictable. This was something new, something that spoke of a fundamental change in their thinking. My lord, General Vorthak said during their daily briefing, our intelligence suggests these attacks are being coordinated. The humans appear to have established some sort of underground network. How is that possible? We monitor all their communications. They seem to have developed new methods, my lord. Methods that bypass our surveillance systems. Emperor Zephix leaned back in his throne, his 6 arms drumming against the armrests. The attacks were causing significant damage to his infrastructure, but more concerning was their effect on the other species within his empire. Word was spreading about the humans' new tactics, about their willingness to die for their cause. Rebellion was contagious. Double our security protocols, he commanded. I want every human ship tracked and intercepted before it can reach its target. But even as he gave the order, the Emperor knew it would not be enough. Something had changed in the humans after New Terra Colony. Something that his intelligence networks didn't understand and his military couldn't contain. As he dismissed his generals and advisors, Emperor Zephix found himself alone with thoughts that disturbed him more than he cared to admit. In all his centuries of rule, he had never encountered a species that responded to loss with such focused determination. He had expected the humans to break after New Terra Colony. Instead, he had forged them into something harder, something that whispered a single word across the galaxy and made even his most hardened commanders nervous when they heard it. Remember, 6 months had passed since the destruction of New Terra Colony, and Emperor Zephix could no longer ignore what was happening to his empire. The daily reports painted a picture he refused to believe, yet could not deny. The humans were winning, not through superior technology or larger fleets, but through something far more dangerous. They were inspiring others to fight. The single word they whispered before each attack had become a rallying cry that echoed across a dozen star systems. Remember, Admiral Corvex, the Emperor's most trusted naval commander, stood before the throne with his head bowed low. His usually pristine uniform showed signs of recent combat, and his left arm hung in a medical sling. Report, the Emperor commanded, though he dreaded what he would hear. The Centauri system has fallen, my lord. The human fleet arrived with support from 3 other species. They coordinated their attack perfectly, striking our supply lines first before engaging our main battle group. 3 other species? The Emperor's voice carried a dangerous edge. Which ones? The vegan traders, the Proxima mining guilds, and Admiral Corvex hesitated. The Altarian peacekeepers, my lord. Emperor Zephix rose from his throne so quickly that his ceremonial robes billowed around him. The Altarians had been loyal subjects for over 2 centuries. Their peaceful nature had made them ideal administrators for the Empire's bureaucratic needs. The Altarians? They have never engaged in combat operations in their entire recorded history. That appears to have changed, my lord. Our intelligence suggests the humans have been sharing their military knowledge, teaching other species how to fight. The Emperor began pacing across the vast throne room, his 6 arms gesturing wildly as he processed this information. The humans were doing something unprecedented in the galaxy's history. Instead of trying to conquer other species, they were liberating them, teaching them to resist. What of our retaliatory strikes? Have we not made examples of these traitor worlds? Admiral Corvex's expression grew even more grim. We have tried, my lord, but every time we move to punish a rebellious system, the humans appear to defend it. They seem to know our plans before we execute them. Impossible. Our communication networks are encrypted with quantum algorithms that no primitive species could break. My lord, I believe we may have underestimated human capabilities. Their technology appears to have advanced rapidly since the New Terra incident. Emperor Zephix stopped pacing and fixed his admiral with a stare that had made countless beings quake in terror. Are you suggesting that a species barely capable of interstellar travel 6 months ago has somehow developed technology superior to ours? Not superior, my lord. Different. They seem to have abandoned conventional approaches entirely. Their ships are smaller, faster, and they operate in swarms rather than traditional battle formations. More concerning, they appear to have developed some form of instantaneous communication that our sensors cannot detect. The Emperor dismissed Admiral Corvex with a wave, needing time to think. He walked to the massive window that dominated one wall of his throne room, gazing out at the capital world below. Thousands of species had built their lives under his rule, accepting imperial protection in exchange for absolute obedience. Now, that obedience was cracking. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. The Emperor accepted the call, and the holographic image of General Vorthak appeared before him. "My lord, we have a situation developing in the Outer Rim territories." "What kind of situation?" "The humans have established what they call memorial stations in 17 different systems. They appear to be some form of communication hub, but our attempts to approach them have been unsuccessful." Define unsuccessful. General Vorthak's reptilian features showed clear discomfort. "Every ship we send to investigate these stations encounters the same phenomenon, my lord. As soon as they enter sensor range, their crews begin receiving transmissions." "What kind of transmissions?" "The names and ages of the children who died at New Terra Colony. All 5,731 of them. The transmissions are sent directly into the crew's minds, my lord. Our soldiers report hearing children's voices, laughing and playing, followed by silence." Emperor Zephix felt a chill run down his spine. Psychological warfare was not unknown in galactic conflicts, but this was something different, something that reached beyond mere military tactics into the realm of the spiritual. "What effect does this have on our crews?" "Many refuse to continue their missions. Others have requested transfers to non-combat positions. A significant number have actually defected to join human forces." The Emperor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. "And these memorial stations? What do they actually do?" "We believe they serve as coordination centers for human resistance activities. But, my lord, they seem to be having an effect far beyond military coordination. Species throughout the galaxy are beginning to question imperial authority. They ask why we killed human children. They want to know if their own children are safe." Emperor Zephix turned away from the window, his mind racing. The humans had done something unprecedented. Instead of hiding their loss, they had turned it into a weapon more powerful than any fleet. They had transformed the death of their children into a galactic symbol of imperial cruelty. "Sir," General Vorthak continued, "there's something else. We've intercepted communications suggesting the humans are planning some kind of major operation. Our intelligence sources indicate they call it Project Memorial." "What do we know about this project?" "Very little, my lord. But based on the resources they appear to be gathering, it will be significant. They're calling for volunteers from every human colony, every allied species." The response has been overwhelming. The Emperor dismissed the transmission and stood alone in his throne room, surrounded by the symbols of power that had once seemed unshakable. For the first time in his long reign, he felt something he had not experienced since his youth: genuine fear. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had ever encountered. They did not seek conquest or revenge in the traditional sense. They sought something far more dangerous: justice. And they were willing to die for it in numbers that defied all logic. A new transmission alert interrupted his thoughts. This time, the source was completely unexpected. Emperor Zephix. The voice belonged to Admiral Marcus Chun, the human who had spoken to him after New Terra Colony. But the Admiral was no longer speaking from Earth. The background showed the bridge of a massive starship, and Chun was surrounded by beings from dozens of different species. "Admiral," the Emperor replied, his voice carefully controlled. "I see you have made some new friends." "They're not friends, Emperor. They're family. That's something you'll never understand." "What do you want, human?" Admiral Chin's expression remained calm, but his eyes held the same quiet certainty they had shown months earlier. "I want you to remember something, Emperor. You killed 5,731 human children. But in doing so, you created something far more powerful than any army." "And what is that?" "Hope." Admiral Chun stepped closer to the camera. "Hope that tyranny can be defeated. Hope that the strong do not always triumph over the weak." Hope that somewhere in this galaxy, someone is willing to stand up and say no to creatures like you. The Emperor's confidence wavered as he looked at the beings surrounding the human admiral. Vegan traders who had never held weapons now wore combat gear. Altarian peacekeepers stood beside human marines. Even some species he didn't recognize had joined this growing alliance. "You cannot defeat the Imperial fleet," the Emperor said. "I command 10,000 worlds." "You commanded 10,000 worlds," Admiral Chen corrected. "As of today, that number is significantly smaller, and it's going to keep shrinking until you face a choice." "What choice?" "Surrender, or watch everything you built burn to ash." The transmission ended, leaving Emperor Zephix staring at a blank screen. For several minutes, he stood motionless, processing what he had just witnessed. The human alliance was larger than his intelligence had suggested, more organized, more determined, and they were no longer just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for every species that had ever suffered under Imperial rule, every child who had died in the name of Galactic Order, every world that had been conquered and stripped of its freedom. The Emperor called for an emergency session of his War Council. As his generals and advisors filed into the throne room, he studied their faces carefully. For the first time, he saw doubt in their eyes. Fear. Some were beginning to question whether the empire they had built could survive this new kind of war. "My lord," General Vorthak began, "perhaps it is time to consider negotiation. The humans might accept a peace treaty if we offer significant concessions." "Concessions?" The Emperor's voice rose dangerously. "I do not negotiate with rebellious subjects. My lord, they're no longer simply rebellious subjects. They have become something else entirely. They have united half the galaxy against us." Emperor Zephix looked around the room at faces that had once shown nothing but absolute loyalty. Now he saw calculation, planning. Some were already considering what side they would choose if the empire fell. "Leave me," he commanded. As the throne room emptied, Emperor Zephix faced a reality he had never imagined possible. The humans had done something that no military strategist had ever conceived. They had turned grief into a weapon, loss into strength, and the death of their children into a rallying cry that echoed across the stars. For the first time in his centuries of rule, the Emperor began to wonder if he had already lost a war he didn't even understand he was fighting. Outside his palace, on worlds throughout his shrinking empire, beings of 100 different species were learning a new word. A word that carried the weight of hope and the promise of freedom. Remember, and they were teaching their children to say it too. The imperial palace shook under the bombardment from the massive fleet surrounding the capital world. Emperor Zephix stood in his throne room, no longer the absolute ruler of 10,000 worlds, but a cornered tyrant watching his empire crumble around him. 1 year. That was all it had taken for everything to collapse. The human alliance had grown beyond all predictions. What began as scattered resistance after New Terra Colony had become a coordinated revolution spanning 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved for centuries now fought side by side with humans, all united by a single word that had become their battle cry. "Remember." General Vorthak approached the throne with his head low, his scales dulled with exhaustion. Most of the Imperial forces had either defected or been destroyed. Only a handful of loyalists remained to defend the capital. "My lord, the humans are requesting a meeting," he reported. "A meeting?" Emperor Zephix laughed bitterly. "They have my capital surrounded and my fleet destroyed. What could they possibly want to discuss?" "Surrender terms, my lord. They are offering safe passage for all Imperial personnel who lay down their weapons." The Emperor's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "They offer mercy? After everything they have endured?" "It appears to be genuine, my lord. Admiral Chun has personally guaranteed the safety of all who surrender." Emperor Zephix stared at the tactical display showing the human fleet in orbit above his world. Thousands of ships from dozens of species, all following the lead of beings they had once dismissed as primitive. The irony was not lost on him. Very well. Send word that I will meet with their admiral. But the meeting will be here in my throne room. If I am to fall, it will be in the seat of my power. 3 hours later, the massive doors of the throne room opened to admit a small group of figures. Admiral Chun led the way, flanked by representatives from many of the species that had joined the human alliance. But what struck the Emperor most was what they carried. Memorial stones. Thousands of them, each one bearing the name and age of a child who had died at New Terra Colony. The delegation arranged the stones in neat rows before the throne, covering the floor with a sea of remembrance. When they finished, Admiral Chun stepped forward and spoke in a voice that carried across the vast chamber. Your Imperial Majesty, we meet again. Emperor Zephix studied the human admiral. Chun looked older, marked by the stress of a year-long war. But his eyes held the same quiet certainty they had shown from the beginning. You have won, Admiral. My empire is broken, my fleet destroyed. What more do you want? We want you to understand something, Admiral Chun replied. You killed 5,731 children. Each one had a name. Each one had dreams. Each one was loved. Yes, I killed them. What of it? Death is the price of rebellion. Admiral Chun gestured to the memorial stones covering the floor. Look at them, Emperor. Really look. The youngest was 3 years old. Her name was Sarah Martinez. She wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. I do not need to hear their histories. Yes, you do. Admiral Chin's voice hardened. Because you never understood what you destroyed. You saw numbers on a report. We lost children. The Emperor felt uncomfortable under the human's gaze, but he maintained his composure. War has casualties. I regret that children were involved, but their deaths served a purpose. What purpose was that? To break your spirit, to show your species the futility of resistance. Admiral Chin shook his head slowly. You understand so little about us. You thought killing our children would make us weak. Instead, you gave us a reason to become strong. The Emperor's confusion must have shown on his face, because Admiral Chun continued with something that might have been pity in his voice. You ruled through fear, Emperor. You made beings submit by threatening what they loved most. But you made a mistake when you threatened human children. What mistake? You assumed we would respond like you, that we would calculate costs and benefits, weigh survival against defiance. You thought we would choose to live as slaves rather than die as free beings. Emperor Zephix leaned forward on his throne, and instead, you learned what happens when you threaten a human child. You learned that there are some lines that should never be crossed, some acts that turn ordinary people into forces of nature. Admiral Chun gestured to his companions. Every being standing here lost something to your empire, but what united us wasn't hatred. It was love for those we lost, and determination to protect those who remained. Love. The Emperor's mandibles clicked in confusion. Love is weakness. It makes beings vulnerable, easy to control. No, Emperor. Fear is weakness. Fear makes you lash out at children because you can't defeat their parents. Fear makes you destroy innocence to send messages to the guilty. Admiral Chin's voice grew quiet. Love makes you strong enough to challenge the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The Emperor stared at the memorial stones scattered across his throne room floor. For the first time, he tried to imagine the children they represented. 3-year-old Sarah, who wanted to be a teacher. The others with their own dreams, their own futures that he had erased with a single order. You want me to feel guilt for their deaths, he said finally. No, Admiral Chin replied. Guilt requires understanding that what you did was wrong. I don't think you're capable of that level of growth. The words stung more than the Emperor expected. Then what do you want? We want you to remember them. For the rest of your life, however long or short it may be, we want you to carry the weight of what you did. Every day, we want you to think about Sarah Martinez and the other 5,730 children who died because of your choices. Admiral Chun stepped closer to the throne. And when you think about them, we want you to remember this moment. The moment when their deaths brought down your empire. The moment when love proved stronger than fear. Emperor Zephix felt something breaking inside him. Not his spirit, which had been hardened by centuries of conquest, but his certainty, his absolute belief in the rightness of his methods. What happens now, he asked. Now you face justice. Not the brutal kind you practiced, but real justice. You'll stand trial for your crimes against sentient beings. The families of your victims will have their say. And then you'll spend whatever remains of your life thinking about the consequences of your actions. And if I refuse? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. Then you die here today, surrounded by the memorial stones of the children whose deaths made this moment possible. Either way, your empire ends. The only choice you have is whether you face the consequences of your actions or run from them. The Emperor looked around his throne room one last time, at the symbols of power that now meant nothing, at the memorial stones that had become monuments to his greatest failure, at the faces of beings he had once considered inferior, who had proven capable of something he never understood. I will stand trial, he said quietly. As the delegation began to file out of the throne room, Emperor Zephix called after Admiral Chen. Admiral, one question. Chen paused and looked back. How did you know? How did you know that their deaths would unite the galaxy against me? Admiral Chen considered the question for a moment before answering. We didn't know. We just knew that we couldn't let their deaths mean nothing. We couldn't let them be forgotten. But surely you planned this revolution, this alliance. No, Emperor. We didn't plan any of this. We just remembered. We remembered 5,731 children who deserved better than the death you gave them. Everything else followed from that. Admiral Chen turned to leave, then stopped one more time. That's the difference between us, Emperor. You see children as leverage, as tools to control their parents. We see them as our future. And when you destroy our future, we become capable of anything. As the throne room emptied, Emperor Zephix found himself alone with the memorial stones. Thousands of them, each bearing the name of a child whose life he had ended with casual brutality. For the first time in his long life, he knelt down and picked up one of the stones. Sarah Martinez, age 3. He had expected to feel nothing. Instead, he felt the weight of a universe that had turned against him because of a single word he had never understood. Remember. Now he would carry that word for the rest of his days, not as a battle cry or a symbol of resistance, but as a reminder of the moment when love proved stronger than fear, when grief became justice, and when the death of children brought down an empire. The irony was perfect. He had killed human children to break human spirit. Instead, their deaths had taught him the only lesson that mattered. Some victories cost everything, and some defeats changed the universe forever. As Emperor Zephix knelt among the memorial stones in his empty throne room, he finally understood what Admiral Chen had tried to tell him from the beginning. When you harm a human child, you don't break human hearts. You forge human souls into something unbreakable. And that word, whispered across the galaxy by billions of voices, would echo long after his empire had turned to dust. Remember.